when we talked back in, I think it was October, at the time you were living 45 minutes away from the farm.
Yeah.
And my first thought when I hear that is like, ooh, that's tough. Because I just know from having a community garden in the past that was 15 minutes away, it was like, do I really want to go check it out? And granted, that was a
Hmm.
hobby, not a business. But when I moved to my house and the garden was out back, it made it a lot easier to like, oh, I'll just go check on that really quick. Or I got to go spot water that thing. The 45-minute drive, I have heard people mention these long drives from their home to their farm location in the past. What's the reality of that been? Is it manageable? Is it tiring?
I mean, it can be pretty grueling. The one benefit was is that it wasn't like I'd mentioned before, I leave the farm that I'm working on and then typically drive to that. So in that drive, it's only like 10 minutes to the new farm. So like after work's not so bad. It's, the long drive home at night, it's cold, you're exhausted. Or driving on like another day when I'm just making the straight commute. Now the only thing is like it's in the same direction, so it's kind of my normal commute anyways. It just tacks on a few extra miles. But but no, I mean it's definitely it makes it harder to like go and check on stuff. If it's oh man, it's gonna get down to 13 tonight. I really and the wind is really kicking up. Like I would love to go check on the row cover, make sure everything got held down and it didn't blow off. But with those long drives, you kind of have to just like wash your hands of it and just say it is what it is. I'll check on it tomorrow after I get off work and drive over there and just hope everything's okay.
Yeah, I guess on one end, the good thing is it forces you to plan ahead because it's like here, I'm gonna be there. I gotta know what to bring. I gotta make sure I get done what I need to get done when I'm there, and I need to make sure I bring back whatever I bring back at the end of it. You leave water running or something like that. Well, it's probably tomorrow unless you want to do that hour and a half round trip to go back and do it.
Which I have done. Yeah, so it's sometimes like, do I feel okay with that water being left on? Once I realize it, it's like, I won't be able to sleep tonight, so let's just go ahead and make the drive all over again.
The tough thing on that is it's 45 minutes each way. So you're at least there and back. That's an hour and a half. And that hour and a half is coming from somewhere. It's coming from your time to work on improvement of the farm. It's coming from time, like call it personal time. Hey, I'm going to just rest and recover and sleep. Or it's coming from personal family time. And that is tough for a lot of people. On the flip side, let's say you find an amazing deal on a property that works and you looked at a whole bunch of stuff. You looked at 50 properties and you found this one and it's amazing, but the one wart on it is it's 45 minutes away. If you, having done that for a couple months now, what are your thoughts if you had to do that for years into the future?
I would, I would definitely uh, have a game plan on trying to get closer. Ultimately, like it's not going to be my end all be all. Like if we owned the home that we were living in, and it was where we were at, and we were happy with it, and weren't really eager to move, I probably wouldn't be able to do that. It would get real old real fast. Like take a Saturday morning. Like if I have to be at the market, to set up at I don't know, let's say 7:30. It's like what time do I have to get up to leave the house in the morning to drive to the farm to get everything packed up to then head to market? Like market mornings are already grueling, and then you tack on an extra 45-minute drive, before the sun comes up. Uh, and I probably wouldn't do it again. But even like with this decision, it was always with the intent that we'd be able to move closer. Um, you know, we're just financially not at a place, especially with starting a new business, where we can just like buy a new house, because of the market, because of the area, finances, whatever. But And so renting gives us the flexibility that, we can like, all right, well, let's try to maybe get 20 minutes away or 15 minutes away. Or maybe there's something on this road or next door that's going to come available, and then we can move on a lot closer to the farm.
Where do you think the tipping point is between okay drive and too far,
I
minute
would
wise?
say, I would say that, like, think about it's 7:30 at night, and your wife's like, "Hey, we're out of diapers," which this happened to us last night. And it's like, how far are you willing to drive to go get a box of diapers at 7:30 at night before you put the kids to bed? For us, where we're at, that's like 10, 15 minutes. And so that's kind of where I put the cutoff. It's like, because the farm's going to be like that. It's going to be like, it's 7:30, the wind is kicking up like crazy, and I don't know if I put out enough sandbags. So I really just need to run over, and it's like, it's 15 minutes there, 15 minutes back. Maybe it's like 45 minutes. I can be back before the kids go to bed. So I would say wherever that is for you, because if you live out in a pretty rural area, 15 minutes might, like for us here, that's nothing. Like that's just to get in town to go to the grocery store. I mean, if you're in a more urbanized area, 15 minutes might be a big deal. So just kind of whatever that's typical, got to run out, pick something up, come back. Um, that's kind of where I would put my cutoff, until you're able to really devote. Like if you're working full time and it's your job solely, then yeah, you can, whatever would be a typical commute. I would say that would be a better realization.
Yeah, I think I'm in that 15, 20-minute zone myself. When I first moved to California, I was working at a place that was in the middle of the desert, and I met my wife, well, girlfriend at the time, and I started driving back and forth every day, and it was at least an hour every day.
Yeah.
Not traffic either, just straight like drive time, 70 miles. And I did that for 6 months, probably put 70,000 miles on a car in, 6, 8
Jeez.
months. And that I was just over it. And granted, you could listen to stuff on the radio, and it was a little bit of a zone out time. But if I look at all those hours added up, that was a lot of hours sitting in a car that, I just would have loved to trade for other parts of life.
Yeah. Yeah. I did the math. Like my typical commute right now between like home, farm job, the farm, and then home. Yeah. And it's like an hour and a half. Yeah. It's about an hour and a half a day, and that's about 50 miles of driving. So it's not like short, it's like long haul, spending some time on the interstate doing that. And so it's like, man, an hour and a half a day that I'm not necessarily losing it. Like, I'm going somewhere to do something that I enjoy, that's, building a career. It's like, but like, man, what could I do with an hour and a half a day, 5, 6 days a week? Like that compounds really quickly into, yeah, like I said, time with your family, or like time that you could devote to the business, or, you know, whatever, a social life, whatever that is.
Well, yeah, I mean, you take that hour and a half round trip down to 30-minute round trip.
Hmm.
That's an hour. Let's say you just did it 6 times a week as a farmer in the bee time,
Yeah.
like 6 hours a week. Like, what would you do with a 6 hour block, right? Like, just,
I
hey,
mean, it's almost a whole nother day of work.
yeah, yeah, or a day to relax or do whatever. So it's
Yeah.
crazy. And one thing we'll talk about as we get into this, because we're going to talk about the process of finding land. Location. There's a couple things I think of when I think about finding farmland. There's location to where you live, and there's also location to market, because both can create problems, and we can kind of get into that. When you I guess what I would caution people to be careful of is, I think it could probably be really easy to fall in love with the otherwise perfect farm and talk themselves into saying, I don't mind driving that much. Like,
Yeah.
it's only an hour drive. Like, that's not that bad. And it's probably not that bad for the first 30 times, but probably on the 100th day or the
Yeah.
200th day, you're probably pretty over it. And fortunately for you, the scripts changed a little bit because you guys were able to find a place to live that was much, much closer.
Yeah. Um, but basically, the way I've been putting it um, is that like my commute's going from a 45-minute drive to a 45-minute walk or 45-second walk. Yeah, the house next door to the farm just completely miraculously, I mean, like, it really does feel like a miracle. Uh, Came available, and so now we're moving in. Yeah, so like the properties adjoin, cutting a path through the woods to be able to go from the farm property over to the house. Plus, there's some acreage at the house, so it'll allow us to like we've got chickens and we've talked about doing some sheep. Probably nothing that would actually be like an enterprise, but just for us. Um, and uh, and so yeah, we're that commute is like this conversation will be almost completely null and void. We'll still have to, have like a 30-minute drive into town to do just about anything. Um, but yeah, I'm gonna get to walk to work every day, which is gonna be great.
Which is awesome. I mean, that's a total game changer. So it takes, we'll get more into it, but like whatever you thought of your farm, it's now like one of these uncovered challenges, like one of those shows where you buy a storage locker, right? And you go through the
Yeah,
front half of the locker, and you're like, oh, I'm pretty happy with this. And then you get to the back of the locker and you open some chest and there's some gold bars in it. And you're like, oh, now I'm really happy about this decision.
yeah.
What about your commute now to work? Because that's the other thing. You were working off farm at Crystal Organic. How has this changed that? Because I mean, you can move closer to your farm, but now if you're farther from work, you've just traded, one problem for another. How does that play into it?
Yeah, I'm hey Diego, sorry, hold on a second. My wife needs me. Sorry.
Yep. Pause. Well, I'll just make some notes for the edit. All right, we'll edit this part out.
Uh, Sorry.
All right, pick up edit right here.
Okay. Um, yeah, so thankfully the new farm and the new house are in the same like small town, same city that Crystal Organic, the farm that I work on, is in. Weirdly enough, like both the farm, the house, and Crystal Organic are all in three different counties, even though it's in the same city. Just kind of weird, rural stuff that we deal with out here. Um, but so that is another like benefit that honestly, if things didn't fall in line the way they did, I probably would have never jumped at this to begin with because basically Crystal Organic is on the way between our farm, crop culture farm, and our current home. And so essentially it's like, I'm making the same exact drive on the same roads every day, and it's just like, all right, turn on the side road and drive a quarter mile to go to one farm, or spend another 10 minutes going down the same road and doing that. So like not only will I be closer to our farm, but I'm also taking like a 35-minute commute every day to work that I've done for the last 2 years, and that's going down to 10 minutes.
Yeah, so a big win on both fronts, which is awesome to hear.
Yeah.
When you think about this start of looking for land, can you take us back to the beginning? I know you mentioned is either when we were offline or maybe in the previous episode that Nicholas at Crystal Organic, this I think the land was a referral from him, somebody he knew maybe. But when you first decided I want to go farm, what was the thought of how you're going to get land?
Yeah. So um, I farmed last year just on our own property, like eighth of an acre here at our house. Um, and it was kind of twofold. One, it was just to see if I could do it, like see if I could work all day and come home and still have to like, weed the beds of, whatever, and grow enough stuff and like try to figure out if anybody that I know actually wants to buy this stuff. And so, but also it kind of gave me a little bit of a like, hey, I'm not just totally green. I've never farmed before, never put anything in the ground. you should lease me your land so I can do this. Like I could kind of show like, hey, I've done a couple of little markets and sold, I don't know, $1,000 stuff all together. Um, and so I did that all with the intention of hopefully 2020, like end of 23 into 24, finding a piece of property to do that. And so, but I would say the main way that I went about it was just like word of mouth, really, uh, talking to other farmers that I know in the area. Uh, you know, mentioned something to our ag extension agent with UGA, and it was just like anybody that I could think that would know of farm properties, whether it's like a farmer that just wants to lease out a chunk. Like I even thought about proposing the idea to Nicholas with like some of the back acreage that wasn't being used. Um, and then also like looking at some of the ag websites that have like I can't think of any of them off the top of my head, but like just like agland.com or whatever, where they
What
just
was
show you can look by your area and see what's available.
what was the ask?
What was the ask? I mean, it was essentially like uh, my family and I are wanting to start a small organic kind of vegetable farm, 2 to 4 acres, water, power. We'll gladly share what we can off the farm, kind of also with, whatever the rent would cost, and just kind of throwing that out there, and just kind of seeing who would bite at that. And I also posted that on like local Facebook groups too. Like Covington Living or whatever in the town that we live in, and just look to complete and total strangers who don't know me and I don't know them, and just like, hey, let us come onto your property and do what we are wanting to do.
For all that asking, how many responses did you get?
I would say just from the Facebook group alone, I probably had a dozen people that were like, um, yeah, like we've got, some of it was like, we've got a property and there's about an acre that we could do something with, and we've always wanted to have a garden and this, and it's like I could kind of tell like, that's probably not going to work. Some of it was like, you know, old time farmer had big pastures, and he's like, man, I can give you up to 15 acres if you want. It's got water and this and that, whatever, and kind of everything in between. And then wasn't really able to have much traction with any of the other people. It was either like, well, we know of a farm that was for sale, but it's not anymore, or it's like, kind of like maybe almost like a referral to referral, like talk to this person and they might be able to get you in touch with this person that could get you in touch with somebody else. Um, but surprisingly, like that Facebook group was really prolific as far as like trying to at least get some leads, and some really promising ones that I was actually gonna go look at the property, and we were gonna kind of work out some stuff in exchange that would have lowered the rent and made it much more economical for everybody.
If you were going to buy, what would 3 to 5 acres of farmable land cost in your area?
Ugh. It's hard to say because like I want to say typically, where are we hanging out right now? It's like it's pretty crazy. Is it? I can't give you like a hard number, but I mean, if like you wanted to buy like a 5 acre property, just like straight pasture, like nothing completely undeveloped, but it's at least clear. I mean, you're probably looking at, um, I mean, it's got to be like 60, 70, $100,000. I
Okay.
want to say we're like close to like 20,000 an acre.
So untenable, I think, for a lot of people. So this going the route of leveraging people who have extra land that want to do something with it, or don't mind giving an opportunity to somebody else is one way to go. When you started looking, so the first part, I'm assuming there's a wide net, right? Like I got to find somebody who has this much land. And
Yeah.
then it's the hits come back and you start filtering down. What were the things that you had to have? Like it's got to check these boxes to get through the first filter.
Yeah, I would say like obviously water and power. Like now that I'm on a piece of property and doing this, like I toyed around with a couple of options, um, and that didn't have water or they didn't have power. But like in hindsight, those are like complete non-negotiables. Like whether it's like city water or a well or something. But without those two things, like at least in our region, like both for obviously irrigation, but you wash pack, whatever you need it for, like it's 100% essential. And same thing with power. Like if you're gonna keep coolers, like I know of a farm in town that they don't have any power on their property, but but they live like 10 minutes up the road. And so they have like a walk-in cooler, at their place. And so they just like pick everything and then like run it home, which still sounds like a huge pain in the butt to me. And so like those two things are super non-negotiables. And then honestly, like another big thing we were looking for was like a cheap place. Like we're not trying to find a place where someone's like trying to like get a return on their investment for their rent. It was more like, hey, you have a chunk of property that you're not really doing anything with. Like maybe you're just mowing it every 2 weeks in the summertime and it's just sitting there. But it's like, would you consider a couple $100 a month, 400 or 500 bucks a month in exchange for letting us do this and doing that. So like those are kind of the three main things, like water, power, and then inexpensive rent.
Yeah, I know you mentioned, hey, we'll bush hog it. Do you do owners in your area get some sort of tax exemption for having ag on it? If it's just normally fallow land, now you're farming, can they claim some sort of ag exemption,
I don't know. I can ask my landlord and follow up on that. But yeah, I don't know if there's like actual like agribusiness happening on the property, if there's any sort of tax exemption,
Okay.
other than if you like put it into conservation, which is like a totally different thing.
Yeah, I asked because my brother-in-law has got a place in Texas and he has some cows that he lets wander the property, and that makes it an ag property. So he gets a lower tax bill on it.
Nice.
What about, okay, so need to haves. We'll say infrastructure, which is water, power, budget. All right.
Yeah.
Location to your where you live. I didn't think, not so important to you. That was more of like a nice to have than a need to have, because obviously you're 45 minutes away when you picked it.
Yeah.
Uh,
But only because of my proximity to my current job. If I would have had to drive 45 minutes from Crystal Organic every day, it would have been, hard pass.
okay, hard pass. What about location to market? So there's two locations, right? Like how close do I live to it? That's where I'm going every day. Location to market is how far do you have to go to wherever you're selling? If it's a CSA drop point, if it's a farmer's market. This one, I look at this as more flexible because if it's a CSA drop point or a farmer's market once a week, it's there and back. And if you can go to a smoking market, I'll just say you're near Atlanta. I don't,
Yeah.
and you can go to Atlanta and there's a mega farmer's market there, but it's 2 hours away. Or you can go to some rinky dink farmer's market that's 30 minutes away. Like you're better driving that hour and a half, get the better market, because that extra trip is going to pay off monetarily. How did you view location to market?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely played a big role in picking where we are. I don't know how it is everywhere else, but that's like the really interesting thing about at least around the Atlanta area is it goes from like urban, suburban, rural super quick. Especially like headed out I-20 our way, and so it's like I can be from the farm to Atlanta, like downtown Atlanta in yeah, like an hour and 15. Um, and so maybe an hour and a half, depending on traffic. And so it's like I can be out in the sticks and like almost no cell service, and then be in downtown Atlanta, huge city in less than 2 hours. And so, that was definitely a consideration. Like if I would have been any further out, that would have made it tough. But also, we have Athens, where University of Georgia is. That's even closer. Maybe 45 to an hour. but also I, picked this location with a couple of farmers markets that were within like a 30, 45 minute drive. And so, I mean, like within a less than 2 hour drive, I have like over a dozen like kick-ass farmers markets that I kind of just sort of like, do I want to go really big with and you have to compete with some of the guys who've been doing it for a long time, but tons of customers? Do I go sort of like super small, like the one in our hometown where there's like no competition, or do I go sort of medium size? So yeah, like it definitely played a big role.
Where would you put that on the scale? Would you put it, would you say you're more willing to drive to a great market and live further away if other conditions met?
Yeah, yeah, I would say that like kind of hour and a half, that hour and a half ish range is
Yeah.
probably about the max that I'd go. Yeah.
What about pre-existing land condition, soil, whatever's growing on it? Maybe it's, like, would you take on a pasture? If there was trees you had to take out, how important was soil in the selection?
Yeah. I was fully prepared on like going from pasture slash lawn, to like full on cultivated land, like, beds. I was kind of preparing for that. In hindsight, man, that seems like a lot of stinking work. Um, I was blessed enough to be able to land on a piece of property that had been cultivated, um, and, for better or for worse, it had been cultivated kind of here and there over the last like 4 or 5 years. So, but at least it's like it's loose. It's I'm not dealing with sod. I'm not dealing with like pasture grass. Um, that would probably be a tough sell. I mean, if you have the time, if you're like, we're gonna take all of this year to just get things ready, maybe have a little bit to sell, but mostly we're just focused on like building things out. Like we can afford to do that. Then yeah, I'd say go for it. But in my case, where it's like we're trying to do a quick turnaround and get this thing running and gunning, um, yeah, I would definitely pick something that has like great potential. Like there was stuff. Um, I had a track record of two other people that had been on that property that I could like ask the landlord, but also ask another farmer who I knew who used to farm on that property and be like, hey, how is it? And they're like, it's great soil, man. Go for it.
Do you view soil as something that is fixable?
Oh yeah, yeah. I don't think. I mean, you've seen what our soil looks like here. Like if I think it's I think with enough time and the proper techniques and just sort of stewarding of the land. Yeah, I think. I mean, I haven't encountered something that seems like too far gone, other than maybe like pure sand. But yeah, I wouldn't farm that to begin with.
Yeah. So with inputs, whether that's time, effort, money, I think that's a fixable one. You have more levers to pull to control that versus distance to say where you live, short of moving, right? Like a
Yeah.
45-minute drive is a 45-minute drive. You're not changing that.
Mm-mm.
What about, I don't know what the lay of the land is there out here. Nothing's flat. How would you view a property that checked a lot of boxes, but it was sloped?
Um, I definitely would still consider it. I mean, we're pretty flat, I would say. A little bit of rolling hills and stuff, but for the most part, um, it would. I mean, it always depends on the grade. I mean, if it's like, oh, there's a low spot or whatever, but if you're talking like the side of a mountain, like that seems like terracing seems like a big thing. Like, so maybe not for market gardening. If you're doing something a little bit more like, I don't know, like silvopasture,
Yeah.
agroforestry type things like that, maybe. But yeah, flat is pretty important when you're only working on an acre.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, if you're in a lot of areas of the country, you're going to get flat. And then the other one I had down here was aspect, where are we in the compass directions? But if you're flat, you're pretty good unless you got, either a tall building or a forest on one side.
Yeah.
I'm assuming any pre-existing farming infrastructure on the property, that's just a straight bonus.
Yeah, yeah, I was prepared to just start from square one. Like, yeah, we'll just block off the back half of the Caterpillar tunnel and use that as like as like a tool shed, or get like a carport and convert that into wash pack or whatever. But yeah, that's just like the huge bonus to have that in any sort of infrastructure, outbuilding, barn, whatever.
You found the land, you've had experience on it for a few months. I love sports analogies. So if we have to draft, all these selection criteria, cost, location to house, location to market, soil, water, power, what's your number one pick? Like, this is the factor I weight the most.
I would say for our region, and knowing that like wash pack is super important for the way that like what we're going to be growing, like water goes number one. you know like I'm like we're to stick with your analogy, like we're going to bomb this season so that next, in the draft, that we can get the number one pick, just to make sure that we get water.
Right, right. Okay, so that's the Caleb Williams. What's number two?
um Probably power. Once again, everything's sort of perspective, but yeah, being able to like run a greens bubbler, a fan for a greenhouse, for like a prop house, refrigerators, or walk in, like powers. Power's almost as important as water.
I'm guessing three is cost.
That one's a tough one. It was my non-negotiable, just because I knew that was something that I wouldn't be able to float $1,000 a month for a piece of property right now. And so for me, that would definitely probably be that third one.
Here's maybe a sneaky one. What about relationship to the landowner? There's some people that you start talking to and you can just tell, all right, this person wants to work with me. There's other people, like they'll work with you, but it's going to be difficult. Did that play into it all? Like, hey, I'm just vibing with this owner.
Oh yeah, I would say that like with our landowner, like vibes have been a big part of that. Like way bigger of a part than I thought it would be. Like I was fully prepared to just go in like, let's do everything by the book. Let's have our lease hammered out, and it's just like no emotions, no relationship whatsoever. And he was pretty adamant that he wanted it to be like very relational. Like, I want to talk to you regularly. Like let me know what's going on. Let me know how I can help. And so um, yeah, I would say having a good like landlord, or the person who owns your property, is a big deal, because it could be that could be like your biggest pitfall, or he or she could become your biggest cheerleader. And potentially like save you when you're in a bind. Like, oh my God, we just lost everything. I cannot make rent this month. And if you have a good relationship and he trusts you, and you trust him, and like he might be willing to like move heaven and earth to make sure that you don't have to leave that property.
Yeah, that's a big ace in the hole
Yeah.
because, like we're reading The Grapes of Wrath with my kids in school. And, back then it's like bank, hey, we're just going to take your property,
Yeah.
knock down the fences, knock down the house, too bad. So if you did get in a bind, having that ability to go human to human
Exactly.
versus straight business talk, I think is really critical, because that could mean a lot of money. If you need it, like, hey, can we forego 1 month or do something? It's a way of getting a line of credit, if you will,
Yeah.
without having it. So I think that's really important. If you look at this land that you have, so you found the land, it's checking the boxes, you start talking to the landowner. When it comes time, you're like, you're thinking to yourself, all right, this land's gonna work. What was the initial conversation with the landowner on this property? Like, I like it. all right, I want to come to some deal here. How's that conversation go?
Um, I would say like obviously like let's get the like the hard conversation out of the way and talk like a money number. Like what are you wanting a month for the property? And then sort of kind of all of the trappings of that. Like, hey, this tractor that's sitting here, like in the side of the barn, like is that included in the rent? Do I have to rent the tractor from you? Um, you know, like hey, what are you thinking? All right, he gives me a price, and then the next question is like, all right, so what does that include? Like, are you paying power? Obviously we're on the well, so we don't have to pay water. It's like, and so it's, at least for me, it was like once the vibe checked out and he heard a little bit more of what we were doing, and what we were trying to do, and I got to kind of get a little bit of an idea of like where he's coming from and how enthusiastic is he about this. Then it was like, let's hash out numbers. And then once we can kind of hash out numbers, then the next immediate thing was, like, I want to see a business plan. Like once we kind of,
He asked
um,
for that.
yeah, he asked for a business plan. Like he wanted to see what the next 3 years were going to look like.
Did he ask for any references for you to like say, hey, who is this guy?
Because he had a relationship with Nicholas and Jenny, because it was actually Jenny, Nicholas's wife, who, um, she was the one that told me like, "Hey, you should talk to this guy." And I was like, "I don't know who you're talking about." They're like, "Oh, he's actually going to come to the farm today to buy stuff." So it was just really cool how that worked out. But because he had a relationship with them over the last several years, I think that was kind of all the reference he really needed.
They kind of vouch for you, indirectly in a way.
I mean, I would say directly,
Yeah.
yeah.
So he asked for this business plan. He's got a feel for you. What what did you put together to give him?
Um, yeah. So I mean, really, I kind of just started Googling like farm startup business plan outline, like templates, and just like scouring through them and being like, I don't like this one, I don't like that one. This one seems like super involved. Like there's like a whole page just dedicated to, like the market research of the area, whatever. And so I just kind of found a template that I liked and started plugging in what I thought we could do. Like, here's what I think we can do at a farmer's market, this year. This is how much I think it's going to cost in startup costs, um, you know, and so on and so forth. Like, these are the infrastructure bits that we need to add over the next this many years. And it's like year two, like, all right, let's build our number of online CSA customers, and we hopefully will be able to do this much at market, and just kind of hammer out like a rough idea on like a year one, year two, year three sort of thing.
Did he have any pushback on any of it?
Not really. Um, I think if anything, he was probably, because he's a businessman. He knows what he's doing. It was just like probably a little bit of pushback on a combination of like those numbers seem um, a little idealistic. Like you might want to rethink. Basically, it was like on my cost, he thought it was too low, and on my potential revenue, he thought it was. He also thought it was too low. So he's like, it's going to cost you more than you think it's going to, but you're also, I think you can make way more than you think it will. And so, and so we kind of hashed it out. So in a way, he almost sort of helped me hammer out the business plan, to a place where he thought it could be. But honestly, I think just the fact that I took the initiative to do that and to really spend weeks thinking about that and building it consciously, was probably enough to make me feel like confident that we could make this happen.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes showing up is half the battle. I can tell you that
Exactly.
from just talking to a lot of people, especially these days. The In a way too, he becomes a bit of a mentor, right? If he's a business owner and he's giving you feedback, you have experience, whether, I don't know what he did or how he made his money, but obviously he has experience in the world, so that's going to be beneficial. When you came to an agreement, was it straight X dollars per land per month, or was there some sort of trade involved? Yeah, it's X dollars plus dot dot dot.
No, we pretty much, and I wanted to do this. He was surprisingly more open to like more of the trade and a little bit more loosey goosey. But I was just like, man, listen, like I want to do this right. You know, I've done things that were like strictly relationally based, and some have ended up good, and some gotten super burned on, and no other people who have. And so it's like I told him, I was like, man, I want to do this right. Let's just do like a hard number. This is what I owe you every month on this day, and you know, and anything that we do above and beyond that is just you and I building this relationship. You know, and maybe we can evaluate later on down the road. But for right now, like let's just do a hard number. Like I asked for that just because frankly, you got to understand, like at this point, I've known this guy like 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. And so even though he seems to be successful at what he does, and you know, I didn't get any sort of apprehension about him. You know, it was just like, man, I need to cover my butt and think about my family and think about this business. And you know, and it's like, let's do the hard impersonal thing now, and then let the personal part sort of develop and see where that goes with the business part later.
Yeah, I think it's smart because everything's always good until it hits the fan. And then
Exactly.
that's when it goes awry. What type of term did you end up signing?
We did a 3-year lease. So I figured that would give me, I didn't want to go year to year. Um, you know, I feel like that for me, that gave me too much of an out. It's like, man, you know, like if 2024 was just crap, then it's like I could be like, I'm done with this. You know, but with 3, it felt like I was, you know, giving myself time to build the business and like have to commit to this property. But then also gives me the opportunity, like maybe 3 years from now, the business is growing, and we find a piece of property that we can actually own and start building equity in.
To give yourself a fair shot of making the
Yeah.
most of it. When you if you're driving by this property on the road, how would you describe it? A old homestead, a future old farm site? Like, what would somebody think if they drove by it?
If they saw it, it's kind of in the woods. You know, it's basically like trees all the way down the road, except for like where the gate is to go in. You know, like if you know what you're looking for, you could see it, but it's that's the one downside is it's not the best like frontage property. You know, which that was one of the things I had on my list is like a nice to have, but not was like, you know, good frontage road. Now the only benefit is the house next door has amazing, you know, accessibility. You know, big driveway, plenty of space, like potentially put like a little farm stand. But the farm itself is like, you know, it was tucked away, and that was definitely an apprehension with the property. It was like, man, it's going to be hard to get people to this property.
Because it was a market farm in the past.
Yeah, the guy tried to, you know, he wanted to, and I
The
just think,
owner or somebody else?
well, he was initially going to basically be like the own, like he was the owner and like financing it all, and then he was like hiring a young guy who's going to basically be the like the farm manager and just do all like do the actual like farming work. Um,
Sounds like a recipe for disaster.
yeah, and yeah, and it was like all kind of done on relationship with no contract. So I'm at least as far as I know. I could be wrong, but yeah, but it's like on a backside of his property, so it was just kind of like here's a halfway decent spot that might work. You know, it was never established with the intention of it being like we're gonna bring people out to the farm and we're gonna have a farm store and do you know events and things like that.
So you end up getting it. Sounds like it's a pretty good deal at the end of the day. You know, if you're have the two, I guess the old fashioned scale, right? The plus side has more weights on it than the negative side when you're picking this 3-year lease. One thing that I know you've done that we talked about was you pushed initial payments back.
Yeah,
And why that's important and something for people to think about is if you take over a property, unless it's farm ready turnkey right away, if you start paying now, like day zero, where's that cash coming from? It's got to be coming from savings or startup budget or another job or something else, because odds of you cash flowing it from day 0 or even on day 30 when the rent's due is pretty low. So you sign the lease in the fall,
Yeah, in September,
September, and you don't have to make payments until
July.
July with no arrears. That initial time is just free time essentially.
Yeah.
So that gives you time to get your systems up and going, do all the bed prep, all the work that's required, but doesn't directly contribute to cash flow.
Yeah.
Was
Yeah.
that
And
his suggestion or yours?
that was mine. And and kind of back to the like, the draft and like the top things like having cheap rent, like I had that in mind because kind of the way I saw it, it's like, man, if someone's not trying to make money off of this and whatever they get from this is just sort of gravy on top, then they would be totally down for not having to make money right away. Um, and so in the hopes of it's like, man, I'm already going to be doing all this build out for free, like not making any, not generating any sort of like cash flow with doing this stuff. It's like, that's going to be a hard enough motivation as it is. But then also when it's like, first of the month comes around and I gotta pay, I gotta pay rent on a house and now another piece of property. Like I could see that being extremely demoralizing. And so, yeah, like that was always kind of the game plan from day one was like, I want to find something to where like my rent payment is not a like make it or break it for the landowner. Um, so that, yeah, then I can then throw out the proposition like in the midst of our, or towards the end of our negotiation and be like, hey, like, what do you think if we put it off till July? And then obviously picking July, like the middle of summer, so that hopefully I've got all of the spring and then like a good chunk of the beginning of summer to get cash flow positive. So then hopefully maybe even like store up some rent so that I'm not just like having to make rent every month, but I've already got a little bit of like money saved up in the account to be able to start doing that.
It's one thing I've learned in life is always ask
Oh yeah.
and
Worst they can
ask.
do is say no.
Yeah, that's it. And I would go as far as saying, ask the ask you're uncomfortable asking for. If you're comfortable just asking, you didn't ask for enough. You need to go where like you're really regretting it. If you think about it, I mean, this guy's got the property sitting there. I don't know what you're paying, $1,000 a month, right? Like, is that going to change his life? It probably is not going to change his life. Does he really probably care whether he gets $500 a month, $1,000 a month, or $1,500 a month, or he doesn't get that $1,000 a month for 6 months? I mean, in a perfect world, sure, he'd want the money, but like, I think a lot of these people, if they have land in this situation, like they're just sitting on it anyway, not
Exactly.
doing anything. So ultimately, they're probably doing this a lot because they want to help you,
Yeah.
and it's in their best behalf to make it financially. It's like, we need to motivate you financially so you show up and do this,
Yeah.
but I can't have the vice so tight that you're like crippled, and you make one step out of the line and you're instantly like fried.
Yeah. Because I probably, if he would have been like, I don't want to charge you any rent, which would have been insane. Like that would have probably been a big red flag. Um, just because it's like, man, like there's no, like that's even more trust that it's just like, because this could just change one day and be like, man, you've never paid me a dime in rent. Get out of here. Which thankfully, my relationship with him, like I never see that day ever coming. But it's like, so in that same way, like that financial incentive is also sort of covers you so that there is some sort of like value exchange other than just like, man, I just want to help you out in the goodness of my heart.
How big is the property you ended up getting?
Um, it's about an acre and a half, so it's not like the actual like farm property. Like that's inside the deer fencing.
Got it. So you have access to that acre and a half?
Yeah, and like I said, we have a relationship. Like I can, like we've already started talking about how we want to expand in the future to other parts of his property, and like we'll handle that down the road. So there's like acre and a half with the option to expand as the business
Does he live
expands.
on it, or is it just like this is just a
Part
hobby?
time. He has a house on the other end of the property, but he lives in town, and then it's kind of like his, you know, hang out in the country, enjoy quiet life, that place.
It's an acre half, water, power. Do you mind saying how much you pay a month?
Probably not.
Okay,
I just
okay,
for I think I would want to respect him and not
yeah,
throw that
no
out there.
problem. But manageable, you think, for a part-time farmer?
Oh yeah, for sure.
What would you want to pay more than $2,000 a month?
Oh heck no.
Okay, so less than $2,000, and you'd be okay, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I would. Now like if it's kicking butt, and like we have to reevaluate after a year or so, and I'm like cash flow positive and doing that, like yeah, we can talk about that. But it honestly depends on your operation. Um, if you need more acreage to produce more, then you might be willing to pay more, so on and so forth. But for an acre and a half, starting off with like zero cash flow, like I would have just walked away with my head
The
hanging
the
low.
least you can pay, the better.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and then we'll talk about that actually in the next episode. We talk about the business model because that's going to be a key, right? That it's if you don't count setup infrastructure, if you don't hire labor, it's for sure your biggest monthly expense.
Hmm.
So it's like your market is basically you got to cover that thing first. So the higher you make that initial payment, if so let's say it is just $2,000. If you go to a farmer's market and you got to do, let's say, do one farmer's market a week, you do $1,000 a week at a farmer's market. Obviously, it's not all profit. Let's say you make 75%. We'll go crazy. People hate me for that. So you lose $1,000 to just expenses of
Yeah.
operating costs, right? You take home $3,000. Two goes to cover the land. You're left with a
Hmm.
$1,000 to live on for the
Yeah.
month. That could be tight for a lot of people. So yeah, it's one of those things. Like, all right, I got it. I know I'm gonna have to pay for land probably,
Hmm.
and the lower I can start with that, the more money I can use to save,
Hmm.
to give myself some buffer, to expand the farm, to buy equipment that might help me or season extend or whatever. It would help me maybe quit the other job so I can focus on this job. I mean, there's just so much more wiggle room that it's like you only have the pie, right? The smaller you make that land share of the pie, the better. When you look at this property versus the others that you looked at, in hindsight, is there anything about those other properties that you're just still thinking about, like, ooh, yeah, I did really like that?
There's one property that I considered that was like, I mean, still pretty rural, but like right off a pretty major intersection, and so just like, pass by traffic, like, you throw out a big sign at the entrance that says crop culture farm and whatever, and you have a little like farm stand or a farm store or whatever, and it's just like the drive-by traffic could have been killer because it's like so many people take that road into town every day, but like other than that one aspect of that one property, it's like, man, I kind of feel like I found the honey hole, really. I couldn't ask for a better piece to be working on.
That's awesome. You found it. So progress continues. You signed it in the fall. You're building out infrastructure now. You're farming now. If you look at the last, week or so, what's something that's just gone really well on the farm?
Yeah, my the like the hydrology. I mean, some of it is just pure dumb luck. Some of it was like really well thought out. Was like the way that I laid out my beds. Um, we've had a lot of really heavy rain. Like probably in the last couple weeks, like close to 10 inches, like a lot of rain, and they've been in like just a few really heavy rain events, and so the way that I've seen that the water runs off the property, seeing how it runs off the beds has been really great. Like almost no washouts. A couple of little like tiny low spots in the pathways where it's a little soft and wet. And then like washed out the end of a couple of beds, but for the most part, like everything looks great. And a big portion of that I would say is due to like adding compost. 4 inch, 3 to 4 inches of compost on each bed, like gets it up even higher than just raising the beds to begin with. And so it kind of gives that water the path of least resistance down the pathways. Kind of keep, like, if anything, that rain event helped really like define the beds. And now it's like, oh yeah, like, where maybe they were like kind of 32 or 29, like they're all like perfectly 30 inches now. And so that was a huge win. Something that could be as detrimental is like a massive rain event. Kind of almost ended up helping, and it proved to me that like the layout that I've gone with and the orientation I'm going with like should be able to work long term.
That's good because I mean that's one of those things you don't know till you get it,
Yeah.
and maybe you set them up wrong, and then the first rain comes and oh my god, what did I do? Or
Hmm.
now what do I have to redo? Right?
Yeah.
What about on the flip side? Like, what's been the disaster of the week? Something that's just hasn't gone well. I imagine there's always something that with a new farm business, like something's always coming up. It's just not working. Is there anything that comes to mind?
Um, yeah, I kind of jumped the gun a little bit on like wanting to get stuff in the ground, have stuff for sale, not just looking at empty raised beds, um, you know, and and started planting them pretty quickly. Um, and and like going against my better judgment, but thinking like I can make this work, so on and so forth. But like planted out like not a substantial amount, but a significant amount of like Asian mustard greens. So like baby bok choy, Mizuna, tatsoi, stuff like that. The tatsoi is looking great, but the bok choy and the Mizuna are just like we're going to seed, man. Like it's, like they got transplanted in November. Um, and like I said, hindsight should have known. Like wait until after the solstice, wait until it starts to warm up a little bit, so they don't get that like those swings. But then after this big rain and this big cold that we've had, it jumped up to like 70 degrees 2 days in a row. So it's like within 4 days, it went from a low of 14 to a high of 7. And those guys are just like, screw you, we're going to seed. And so that's been pretty discouraging to like see them and be like I can still eat them and they're going to taste awesome and could probably add them to a mix, but like nice, dense heads of like bok choy, like it's a foregone conclusion.
Yeah.
So
So
that's a bummer.
does most of that become cash crop turn cover crop?
No, it'll probably be, uh, you know, probably turned into a mix. Like I think I can some of the outer leaves that are still really great until you get to that center spire where it's shooting up. Like those can get added to like a stir fry mix, which I'm pushing anyway. So it's not like a total loss. Um, but I imagine if I don't get all of them out soon, yeah, it probably will be cash crop turn cover crop.